Welcome. In this video series, we've been looking at the Feasts of Yahweh, and we will unveil some of the prophetic layers associated with these feasts. Let me say at this point that I do not believe that we are living in the last days. I prefer to characterize it in this way. I believe that we are living in the beginning days. And whether the time starts in just a few more years, 10 or 20 years, I don't know. Yeshua didn't know. And remember, there are several scriptural passages where Yeshua stated, "No one knows the day or the hour, not himself, not the angels, but only the Father." Yet I believe that there are signs that we are to watch for, and some of the signs, I believe, are embedded in the Feasts of Yahweh. My hope, and I think I can promise you, that as we review the feasts, that what will be revealed are some things that you have not heard or seen before. In 1 Thessalonians 5:21, Paul admonishes us to test everything. Hold on to what is good. I ask no less tonight. I believe some of what you will hear and see has been hidden from Christians since around and before 165 AD. It is our Christian heritage, and I believe that the unveiling of the movement towards the Hebrew beginnings of Christianity is part of the end-time revival, or the Great Awakening, spoken of by Paul when he cites Joel 2:32, and he explains the distinction between Jew and Gentile. In Romans 10:11-13, then ends with, "Whosoever shall call upon the name of Yahweh shall be saved." Paul equates this event to life from the dead. That sounds like a restoration, a revival to me. And I believe this awakening, this revival started and has been spreading across Christendom just the last 10 years or so. And these are some of the news releases from different parts of the country. This occurred in 2013, and it's from the Leader Herald in the Palatine Bridge in Arizona. A 3-day seminar, Understanding the Hebrew Roots of Christianity, will take place Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at the House of Zion Ministry. 2 sessions each day will be held, from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. and from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. This is a statement from the North American Baptist Conference in their belief statement. The ordinance of the church are baptism and the Lord's Supper. The Lord's Supper is the partaking of the bread and of the cup by believers together as a continuing memorial of the broken body and shed blood of Christ. It is an act of thankful dedication to Him and serves to unite His people until He returns. The statement references 1 Corinthians 11:23-26. That reference statement in 1 Corinthians, that is a Passover. That's a Passover feast event that's being recorded. This is from the Globe Newswire. The Feast of Tabernacles returns. Cornerstone Church to celebrate and honor Israel. San Antonio, Texas, October 24th, 2013. Here's the story. Cornerstone Church invites the public to attend their annual Feast of Celebration of the Tabernacle celebration, starting on Friday, October 25th, for a weekend of fun, food, and fellowship, ending with a night to honor Israel. On Sunday, October 27th, this event will remind Christians of their roots, the feasts, and how they apply to the believer. It is a celebration to be enjoyed with both Christians and Jews alike. This special time of celebration will include a carnival-style midway of games with food booths and free rides in a family-friendly atmosphere. Venture inside the church for praise and worship, along with special guest speakers every evening. And so it continues. This is an email I received from an office administrator and ministry outreach from the National Association of Baptist Conferences regarding the celebration of the Passover. In part, she states, "Thank you for your inquiry. While I cannot speak for all our churches, my particular church teaches and encourages the celebration of the feasts. So it seems more and more churches are celebrating the importance and are including the feasts as described in Leviticus 23 in their church celebrations. So, is this the information concerning the 7 feasts of the Lord important? Also, how are they associated with the prophecy and end time events? Let's explore these questions and statements, and here are some more. The saved people of God have not just purchased a ticket to heaven, they are in a covenant relationship with Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach. The Bible holy days, the 7 feasts, God's plan of salvation, they depict 7 events, past, present, or significant events, past, present, and future, in God's plan of redemption. These feasts are appointed by the Lord, and they are owned by the Lord, and He calls them my feasts. These Old Testament feasts are, I believe, infinitely more important than just a series of cultural observances. And they did not go away. So, we will be reading from Leviticus chapter 23 in just a moment. You can get your Bibles ready. But before we start, let me describe a few things. There are 7 holidays, appointments, or appointed times, which Yahweh gave to Israel. 7 is the number of completion. 7 is the number of perfection in the Bible. And God gave to Israel 7 feasts, 7 holidays, 7 convocations. They are called that in the Bible, these holy convocations, holy appointments. And they're all given by Yah. And 7 is the number of perfection. These 7 holy days were given about 3,500 years ago, 1,500 years before the time of Christ. They were given by God to Israel through Moses. Now, the Jews today observe more than 7 holidays. For instance, many of you are familiar with the day they call Hanukkah, which occurs near Christmas. Hanukkah is not a biblical holiday. That is, it is not a holiday that God gave to Israel. That's a holiday that the Jewish people developed between the Testaments. The last book of the Old Testament and the first book of the New Testament, right between those 2 testaments. It is also known as the Festival of Lights, or the Feast of Dedication. It's an 8-day Jewish holiday commemorating the rededication of the Holy Temple, the Second Temple, in Jerusalem, at the time of the Maccabean Revolt, against the Greeks of the 2nd century BC. Hanukkah is observed for 8 nights and days, starting on the 25th day of Kislev, according to the Hebrew calendar, which may occur at any time from late November to late December in the Gregorian calendar. It is a holiday that I will perform more information on in another study. Purim is a story that comes from the book of Esther. Yah did not give the Hebrew people that day as a holiday, but the rabbis and the Jewish leaders, they decided to establish the holiday because of the great victory that God had given to Esther and the saving of the Jewish people. So they have a holiday called Purim, and in that story, Haman is the bad guy and Mordecai is the good guy. And in that particular holiday, it's very festive. They have another one called Simchat Torah, which means rejoicing in the law or rejoicing in the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of Moses, or as it is commonly referred to in the Greek, the Pentateuch. It is a celebration marking the conclusion of the annual cycle of the biblical Torah readings and the beginning of a new cycle, which follows immediately after the festival of Sukkot in the month of Tishri, mid-September to early October on the Gregorian calendar. And they have more holidays, but what I want to distinguish is the fact that there are only 7 that God gave in the Bible. The others came about by man, and that doesn't make them wrong, but I want you to understand that there are 7 that God gave, and that's important. And 7 speaks of completion and perfection. These 7 holidays, given 3,500 years ago, 1,500 years before Yeshua depicted the entire redemptive career of Yeshua on his death on a tree, until he returns at the end of the age, at the 7th holiday, called the Feast of Tabernacles. It is then that he will dwell among men the second time. So, 1,500 years before Yah came to earth, information was given to Israel and through Israel, to the world, the entire story of the redemptive career of Yeshua. Now only the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Creator who was the perpetual contemporary, omnipresent, only a God who knows all things, past, present, and future, the God who was and is to come, could know in advance, in great detail, the specific things related to the coming and the revealing of the mysteries surrounding the redemption of his people. So if you have your Bibles open to Leviticus 23, I want to record a little bit. I want to read a little bit concerning each of these 7 holidays. Because Leviticus is the only place in the Bible where all 7 of these feasts are given. And they are given in chronological sequence, the way they would occur throughout a year. And it's the only place you will find it in the Bible. The holidays individually are mentioned in many other places, both the Old and the New Testament. But only in this place will you find all 7 listed in a year chronologically throughout the year. So let's start reading Leviticus 23, starting with verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, The feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, these are my feasts. Convocation simply means a large gathering or a large assembly of people. 6 days shall be done, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work on it. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwelling. Now, this is distinct from the 7 holidays that are going to follow. This is what the Jewish people call the Shabbat. It is in the Sabbath. The Sabbath occurs every week. It occurs when the sun goes down on Friday night, and it lasts until the sun goes down on Saturday night. So their Sabbath is from Friday Sunday to Saturday sunset. From Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. That's the Jewish Sabbath. That's how biblically the Jews kept time. From sunset to sunset. Not from 12:01 a.m. to the next 12:01 a.m. like we do. They were following the Bible. We are not. In Genesis 1, when God created, he said, The evening and the morning are the first day. Then he created, and the evening and the morning are the second day, and so forth. The Bible gives time from sunset to sunset. Again, not from 12:01 a.m. This is just part of what we have devised. But if you're going to understand certain texts in the Bible, you have to understand something of the weekly Sabbaths. For religious Jews and for the observant Jews in Israel, which is about 15 to 20%, and in America it's a lot less than 2%, the observant Jews. Most of the Jews do live in the world, live in Israel and America. There are about 15.5 million Jews in the world. Close to 6 million live in Israel. 6 million live in America. That leaves about 3.5 million in the rest of the world. Some of the largest concentration populations in America would be in Connecticut, New York, North Jersey, Philadelphia, Miami, Chicago, LA. A little under 1/3 of the Jews in the world live in the United States at the present time. In America, however, most Jews are not observant. That is to say, they're not ultra-Orthodox or Orthodox. In fact, I've come to understand most Jews in America would say, I'm Jewish because I eat corned beef. Some of them would say they don't eat pork, but most do. But observant Jews praise the Sabbath. They are very excited and declare the virtues of keeping the Sabbath on the proper timetable. And in the Bible, when it says a Sabbath day journey, about 3/4 of a mile, that is about 3/4 of a mile. That's why an Orthodox Jew in Israel, and even in America, in New York or Miami, and some of the other places, have to live less than 3/4 of a mile from the synagogue. Because he is not allowed to get into the car and drive. He has to walk. And he can only walk so far. He's restricted to about 3/4 of a mile on the Sabbath and to get to the synagogue. Because that is all you're allowed to walk on the Sabbath. If you walk more than that, you are breaking the Sabbath. Your walk is work, and you are therefore working too much. It's too long of a walk. According to WikiLeaks, the online encyclopedia, the hotels in Israel have Shabbat elevators. Because on the Sabbath, you cannot push the button on the elevator. Because the rabbis have determined, not the Bible, the rabbis have determined that pushing the button in the elevator is inappropriate work for the Sabbath. So they have in the hotels, let's say they have 6 elevators. 3 of them will be designated and they will have a sign. And the sign will say Shabbat elevators. Which means you don't push the button, you wait until the elevator comes and the doors open. And you walk in and then you wait until the doors close. And if you're going to the 18th floor in the hotel, you'll wait till you have reached the 18th floor. The elevator will go up floor by floor by floor, stopping at each floor, regardless of whether someone gets on or off. It just goes floor by floor until it reaches the top. The point to be made is that pushing the button is to break the Sabbath in the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community of Jerusalem. Ultra-Orthodox, that's where you see the people with the curls on the side of their heads and the black outfits and the big hats. And when you see that on television, that's a small percentage of the Jews in Israel. They are the Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox Jews. They will literally barricade the streets coming into their community because they don't want cars driving through their community. Because they say you are not allowed to drive a car on the Sabbath. So they don't want cars driving through their community. Women will cook on Thursdays and Fridays, preparing meals for the Shabbat or the Sabbath. So they don't have to cook on the Sabbath. Some other examples are turning lights on and off. Although directly operating electrical appliances is prohibited in Orthodoxy, several indirect methods are permitted according to some authorities. For example, Jews may look at the time on a clock and set a timer before Shabbat to operate a light or an appliance on Shabbat. In some cases, they may adjust the timer on Shabbat. Actions which activate an electrical appliance but are not specifically intended to do so may be permitted if the activation is not certain to occur, or if the person does not receive a benefit from the automatic operation of the appliance. For example, most rabbinical authorities permit Jews to open a refrigerator door even though it may cause the motor to turn on immediately or some moments later, if it's not certain when it will occur. However, they prohibit opening the door if the light inside will automatically turn on, because you are certain of the benefit. They will permit walking past a house with a motion sensor which switches on a light if the street is already well lit, because it is not a benefit. But you cannot walk past a motion sensor light if it is dark, because then you would receive a benefit. Okay, but here now, this is the thing. The Bible doesn't give any of these things as breaking the Sabbath. These are things that are developed by the rabbis. That you were not supposed to work is true, but the interpretation of what that meant, benefit or no benefit, became a big thing with the rabbis. What I want you to understand, and what you need to understand, is that the Sabbath day for Orthodox Jews is very sacred. It's a time for family, for prayer, for meditation on the scriptures. You know, how many remember the intent of the Blue Laws? The same thing was set up for a community under the blue laws. That intent was that the day would bring families together, to reestablish closeness, to reestablish a family time, church, prayer, and to step back from the influence of the material elements in our lives, to reconnect with loved ones. For the Jew, it was the time to going to the synagogue for hours, not just 1 hour as we do in our lives. By the way, it can be called a synagogue. It can be called a synagogue or a temple. If the location is called a temple, it is a liberal or reformed. If it's orthodox, it's called a synagogue. I would imagine that the temple or synagogue would provide activities for the whole family geared towards celebrating God's throughout the day. So in Leviticus, what is being stated in verses 1 through 3? It's talking about a weekly thing, the Shabbat or the Sabbath. And the Jews will say to each other on this particular day, from Friday at sunset to Saturday at sunset, Shabbat Shalom, which means Sabbath peace, which is a very special day. During the week, they will say Shalom Shalom, peace, peace. But on the Sabbath day, they say Shabbat Shalom because it's a very special peace. Now, beginning in verse 4, Yah now gives the 7 holy days that occur only once a year. So the Sabbath is distinct. That's a weekly thing from the 7 holidays that occur once a year. Beginning in verse 4, God gives the 7 holidays that occur once a year. These are the feasts of the Lord, holy convocations which you shall proclaim at their appointed times. On the 14th day of the first month at twilight is the Lord's Passover. That's the first of the 7 holidays, Passover. Then we notice in verse, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread to the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. So the Passover technically is 1 day on the 14th day of the month of the year. And God says this shall be the beginning of months to you. So that's what starts this new year. That's very important. You will see why in a little while, and it occurs the very next day after Passover. You need to see that. Verse 7, on the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. So let's stop here for just a second. We have Passover on the 14th, the Feast of Unleavened Bread on the 15th. Okay? Now let's go to verse 9. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you come into the land which I give to you, and reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted on your behalf. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. Okay, now let's move to verse 15, because that is the next holiday. The counting of the Omer, the feasts of the weeks, or Pentecost. And you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. Count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then you shall offer a new grain offering to the Lord. You shall bring forth from your dwellings 2 wave loaves or 2 tenths of an ephah. They shall be of fine flour, they shall be baked with leaven. They are the first fruits to the Lord. Then the next feast that I identified starts in verse 23. So let's move there. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath rest, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Lord. So this fifth feast is called trumpets in the Bible, the Feast of Trumpets. Now in verse 26, And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Also the 10th day of this 7th month shall be the day of atonement, and it shall be a holy convocation for you. You shall afflict your souls, and offer an offering made by the fire to the Lord. And you shall do no work on that same day, for it is the day of atonement, to make atonement for you before the Lord your God. Now let's go to verse 33. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, The 15th day of this 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles, for 7 days to the Lord. On the first day there shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. So there are 7 holidays, and in this chapter written by Moses under inspiration of God, 1,500 years before his coming, Yah gives 7 holidays, 7 appointments. 4 of the holidays, the first 4, occur in the springtime and are sometimes referred to as the spring holidays. The last 3 occur in the 7th month of the year and are called the fall holidays, the fall feasts, the fall appointments. So 4 are in the spring and 3 are in the fall. The next thing you will notice is that the first 4 holidays are dealing exclusively with the first coming of Yeshua. And I'm going to explain that to you in a few minutes, but I want you to understand this. The first 4 holidays deal with things and are related to things that deals with the first coming of Yahweh some 2,000 years ago. The last 3, are you ready for this, have to do with the book of Revelation. The revealing, the revelation, the revealing of Yahweh. Or to put it another way, they have to do with the second coming of Yahweh. In a subsequent video, we will look at the names Yah, Yahweh, and Yeshua. For now, think of Yahweh as an Old Testament identity and Yeshua as the New Testament identity, and Yah as referencing either Old Testament or New Testament. So the first 4 are the first coming, and the last 3 are the second coming. The first 4 happened about 2,000 years ago. The last 3 are going to happen, I believe, any time now, but still in the future. In between the first 4, which occur in the spring, and the last 3, which occur in the fall, is a time known by many Christians as the church age. It is a time that spans a little over 2,000 years. It is a period we are living in today. Today we are currently between the first 4 and the second 3 feasts. In God's timeline, the church age was a mystery, not revealed in the Old Testament. God's continuing timeline was put on hold during the church age. Kind of like this, he hit the pause button. He took a break. Perhaps you might describe it as even saying he slept, or a delay of some portrayal. Paul refers to it as a mystery in Romans 11:25. For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened to Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. So the first 4 have to do with the first coming of Christ. The first 4 is also called Passover. So mark this down. You can read it and research it later. The description of the Passover is found in Exodus chapter 12. Exodus chapter 12 describes in great detail the Passover. And there was only one Passover. That happened in Egypt, when God said to the nation of Israel through Moses, You are to take a lamb, and you are to take it on the 10th day of the month, because I want you to examine it for 3 days. I want you to make sure that it's healthy, that there is no flaw, that there is no blemish, that it is a perfect lamb of the first year. I want you to examine it carefully. Then you are to slay it and take the blood of that lamb and apply it to the doorposts and lintels of each home. And God said that when I see the blood, I will pass over that home. thus the title Passover. The Jewish people call it in Hebrew Pesach, meaning to pass over, because we are told that the avenging angel of God would pass through Egypt, and the firstborn in each family would die. Remember also that there were plagues, and God said through Moses to Pharaoh, "Let my people go." And Moses said no. And God said, plague number 1. After that, Moses returned and said, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh said no. And then he gave plague number 2. And it continued that way with 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 9 plagues. And when God said for the 10th plague, the firstborn of every family in Egypt is going to die. So God said to Israel, "When you take the lamb, slay it, and apply the blood to the doorposts and the lintel of your home, that the angel that I send will pass over that home. And the firstborn will not die where there is blood applied to your entrances." So remember, it is not that everyone would die. It was only that the firstborn in every family would die. I want to make this clear, because all of humanity is what? We are born firstborn of Adam. In 1 Corinthians 15:22, Paul argues that as in Adam all die, all of humanity is firstborn. But even as all die, all who accept Yeshua will live. He is to be accepted like a bridegroom. That is the type of relationship he wants with us. Close, loving, accepting, understanding, and reliant. Mark 2:18 through 20. Yeshua describes himself as the bridegroom in verse 20. But the day will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and they will fast in that day. And those who follow in his path as the bride in Revelations, as described in Revelations 19:7. Let us rejoice and be glad and give glory to him, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. So there is a remarriage that occurs, a remarriage to a new covenant. If you are born once, you die twice, once physically and once spiritually. If you are born twice, you die once, only physically. In the verses shown here, Paul is conveying that the firstborn will die, and that it is critically important, understanding that all of us are firstborn. It doesn't matter whether you are first, second, third, or fourth born in your family unit. You may have older brothers, younger brothers, sisters, whatever. You are firstborn in the sense of in Adam. In Adam, the Bible says, all die. Even so, in the resurrection of Yeshua shall all live. You become, as the Apostle Paul's, a new creation. When you are accepted by Yeshua, the groom, we say, born again, saved, redeemed. You are born from above, you are regenerated. There is a renewing of the mind that takes place. And this can only happen when you accept the challenge of seeking, searching, and discovering who your groom is, who your relationship and responsibility to is. And during the searching, and because of the searching, only then is a renewing of the mind going to take place. So during this period, the firstborn will die when the blood is not applied to the lintel, the forehead, the mind, where your thoughts, your thinking, your information is kept, and the doorposts, your hands, your arms, a place where you hold God's word. So God said to Israel, slay a lamb, put the blood on the doorposts and the lintel, and when I see the blood, I will pass over. That would also have been true if the Egyptians had believed in the God of Israel, and if they had done this activity. Then the avenging angel would have passed over their home and leave their place unharmed also. In Exodus chapter 12, 1 through 5, I just want to point out one thing. You can make a note and look at it later when you get a chance. God is speaking to Israel, and he says, a lamb. Then he says, the lamb. And then he says, your lamb. I want you to know that there are many symbolic cues to Yah. And one is that people say that Yeshua is a lamb, in the sense that there are many paths to the top of the mountain, many paths to salvation, many paths to heaven, just so you get to the top of the mountain, so to speak. If you want to get there through Buddha, you can. If you want to get there through some New Age, feel-good, do-no-harm, relativism theology, you can. They will say it doesn't matter how you get to the top of the mountain, just so you get to the top of the mountain. They say Jesus is one path, one way among many. He's just a lamb. But I will remind you that Yeshua himself said, I am the way, the truth, the life. Other translations say, I am the way. There is none other. But ultimately he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So it is not enough to say Yeshua is a good man, or Yeshua was a martyr, or a prophet. Symbolically, Yeshua must become your lamb. He must become your personally substituted sacrificial lamb that died, but most importantly, resurrected to become your bridegroom. He died, and Passover begins it all, 1,500 years before his coming to earth. So Passover speaks of your redemption and your restoration. In Galatians 2:20, I have died with Yeshua, and it is no longer I who live, but his Spirit that lives in me, and the life which I now live in the flesh. I live by faith in Yeshua, who loved me and gave himself for me. The New Testament refers to Yeshua as the Lamb over 30 times. Faith and trust in his sacrifice and resurrection makes a person or a nation belong to Yahweh. And one other point. Once through this process, you don't need to worry about the mark of the Antichrist or your head on your hands or on your head. Why? Because when you partake, when you join, when you engage, when you actively seek and take a seat in the Passover, and when you celebrate this service, then according to Exodus 13:9, it says, it shall be as a sign to you on your hand, the doorposts, and as a memorial between your eyes, the lintel, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. This is very important. What God has marked, Satan cannot also mark. And when you do this in remembrance of Yeshua, you are placing a mark on your head, your thoughts, and on your hands, your doorposts. Please understand, there is no way to being rescued except by one, Yeshua HaMashiach. So Passover begins it all. Two things. When it takes place, you participate. The activity places a mark on your forehead and on your hands. And it also speaks to Yeshua's restoration and redemption of his people. What did Paul write in the New Testament in 1 Corinthians 5:7? Look this up, 1 Corinthians 5:7. Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. He was the Passover lamb. So the Passover speaks of Christ's death on Calvary and his mark on us. So in the book of Revelation, we are given warnings regarding the mark of the Antichrist, but perhaps we should be more concerned about the promise given and the mark of God, of Yah, on us. So we've finished the presentation on the Passover, and I will have more videos coming forth. I will finish off the series, but I want you to see some videos that come from Corey Gil-Schuster. He does some interviews on the people in Israel, and I think you'll enjoy them. And I would encourage you to go to visit his website if you want to see more of them. You can visit him on YouTube. Thank you, and don't forget, please select a like, subscribe, and share.
אמריקה ואמריקאים. סך הכל אוהב את אמריקה, אוהב אמריקאים. הייתי מלא פעמים באמריקה והיה לי כיף גדול. אני מת על ניו יורק, אני מואב בניו יורק. אוקיי. יש משהו שמאפיין אותם, כאילו... מגויסת, או שהיא אמיתית? זה 50-50 כזה, לפעמים זה התלהבות שהיא כאילו קצת צבועה אולי, לפעמים אבל זה כאילו באמת כן. פשוט אנשים מאוד נלהבים. אם אתה בחור במסעדה ובלי אחד שומע, אתה שומע אמריקאים מדברים אנגלית, זה אותם ישר. ברמת קול גבוהה, האם זה מפריע לך, האם זה מעצבן אותך, והאם אתה חושב שזה מעצבן ישראלי? זה קצת מרגיז, אבל כאילו זה קצת כזה מעיק, אבל לא ברמה שהוא יותר מדי היסטרי, הייתי אומר. אנחנו עושים רעש, מה אתה רוצה? האמת שזה מפתיע, אני קנדי. לפעמים האמריקאים הרבה יותר רועשים מישראלים, פתאום אתה מגלה נכון, הרבה יותר רועשים מישראלים. נכון. שאתה שומע אותם באמת. בתור קנדי, כן. מה את חושבת על אמריקה ואמריקאים? היית באמריקה? לא. את רוצה לנסוע לאמריקה? את מכירה אמריקאי? חושב על אמריקה ואמריקאים. אנשים טובים. אתה מכיר כאילו אישי? כן, יצחק. מה אתה חושב על אמריקה ואמריקאים? זה אחלה אמריקאים. אתה מכיר כאילו אמריקאים? מה אחלה בהם? אנשים טובים. היית באמריקה? יש לי אזרחות אמריקאית. יש לך מה? יש לך אזרחות? גרת באמריקה? לא גרתי, יש לי אזרחות של מה דעתכם על אמריקה ואמריקאים? נחמד, עושה שם לחול. נופש. נכון? את מכירה? לא כולם. רגע, אני אשאל מי עשה לך משהו, רגע. אבל היית באמריקה? לא, האמת שלא. היית? כן? לא. אוקיי. ומה, אתן מכירות פה אמריקאים? כן. כן? כן, מכירה פה אמריקאים? כן. לא תכמה. מה? אז מה אתן חושבות עליהם?
עכשיו את מכירה אמריקאים.
אנשים נחמדים. על אמריקה ואמריקאים? ארץ ידידתית. זה מה? ארץ ידידה. אמריקה זה ידידה? כן, של ישראל. את היית בארצות הברית? לא. אתה רוצה לנסוע? לא, אין לי מחפש שם, אבל אני מספט אותם. הם עם שאוהב את ישראל, מאוד נחמד. והנשיא מיוחד שם, זה טראמפ. ממש נשיא שהוא בשכמו ומעלה, מוצלח, כישרוני וענק. מה אתה חושב על אמריקה ואמריקאים? אין לי דעה מיוחדת, אבל היה לי כיף באמריקה, הייתי עם המשפחה, היה שם יפה. יש לך משפחה באמריקה? לא, הייתי עם המשפחה, כאילו נסעת עכשיו באמריקה, בניו אינגלנד, וזה היה יפה. מה אתה חושב על אמריקאים? מה האימפרשן שלך, כאילו? לא הכרתי אותם מספיק לדעתי בשביל לחוות דעה על אמריקאים באופן כללי. אוקיי. מה אתה חושב על אמריקה ואמריקאים? אמריקה, אני מדבר על לא ארצות הברית. לא כל אמריקה, כאילו... כן, נכון, ארצות הברית. יש שם רמה גבוהה של חיים. כאילו כיף באמריקה. היית? לא, יש לך. בסדר. יש שם דברים שאין בארץ. יש שם דברים שאין בארץ. השקעות וספר מונסטר. אני מכיר, כן, לא. אין פה בארץ, מה? יש אקסל, יש... יש פה סביבות ה-10 טעמים ויש להם סביבות ה-50. יכול להיות, לא שוטף, אוקיי. יש לי אוסף הכי לזה. אמריקאים? אתה מכיר אמריקאים או...? אישית לא מכיר אמריקאים. אני חושב עליהם שהם אנשים יותר... הם האנשים הפשוטים. כלומר,
לא הבנתי, הם תורמים לעצמם או הם...
לא, שמגיעים לארץ נגיד, אז הם קונים סופרים יקרים, כאילו לא אכפת להם, סתם כאילו זורקים כסף על מוצרים.
טוב, יש להם כסף, טוב,
אז כאילו יש להם רמה יותר גבוהה.
אוקיי.
והם עדיין נחמדים. כאילו, זה לא מסנדר אותם כסף שיש להם.
הלוואי על כולנו, לא? מה רע בזה?
זהו, זהו שאני חושב עליהם.
Want me to come to amazing places like this and ask people your questions? Please donate to the project. It really helps me get to places like this.